Much, Daphne. As Daphne said, my name is Michael Hutchin, and I have the privilege of serving as principal of Senior College. And Senior College is a presenter of the symposium today, which is entitled Roots of Violence, as you all know. As most of you are also aware, Senior College is the academic home for the University of Toronto's retired faculty and librarians. So this is the 16th annual symposium presented by Senior College at the University of Toronto. These symposia have featured broadly based multidisciplinary issues of current concern, and today's topic obviously follows right down this path. Reading any newspaper today or watching television or turning on the radio would make you believe that violence is an unavoidable, inherent part of life in North America and around the world. Our symposium today explores its origins and its dissemination. The opening talk looks at genetic and environmental factors promoting aggression in children, while the second raises a possibility that incitement to violence may be linked to human cognitive processing and stereotyping. Three talks today will consider the promotion and transmission of violence. One looks at the rhetorical style of online alt-right social media in Canada. A second considers toxic leadership, and specifically that of Donald Trump and the events of January the 6th. The third considers the implications of modeling hatred and its spread as a contagious disease. And the other talk today, as Daphne mentioned earlier, considers policing in several countries, how police see their work, and what the public expectations are in the changing circumstances marked by systemic inequity. So this is our second event held entirely online on Zoom as a result of the COVID pandemic. And while the limitations of online rather than in-person meeting are clear, it's also balanced by an opportunity. And that opportunity today is an audience registration greater than would be possible in the confines of the faculty club at the University of Toronto, and also the ability for people to attend from further away, both the audience and presenters. So welcome to you all here in Toronto and to colleagues everywhere. It's a particular pleasure to welcome members of the University and the Community Program, which continues to be a focus of support for Senior College in partnership with the Workers' Educational Association and the University of Toronto through Innis College and the Faculty of Arts and Science. I'd like to personally congratulate the co-chairs of the Symposium Committee, Professors Margaret Proctor and Daphne Maurer, as well as all the members of their committee, the Symposium Committee, for organizing the sterling set of talks today. And I'd also like to acknowledge our hardworking administrator, Venice Crosdale, for organizing the advertising, the registration, and most importantly, holding things together technologically today. Finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors. BMO Financial Services has offered 5 years of support for the symposium and has been a backbone for us. Secondly, Del Manor, Inspired Retirement Living, has been a valued supporter for the symposium and other social senior college projects for several years. They have established retirement communities throughout Southern Ontario. And finally, Living Assistance Services joins us once again. They've been providing home care and living assistance services for seniors throughout Ontario for about 20 years. And we're indeed grateful for the support of all of these three groups. And at this point, I would like to turn the session back to Daphne.
Okay, we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Do we go ahead and start? Okay, I have another announcement. I'll try to draw it out. We're only giving very brief introductions. You should have your program at hand so you can read about the credentials of the speakers, because we want to give them the maximum amount of time. So with that said, our first speaker is Richard Trombley. He's speaking to us from Montreal. That's one of the benefits of the COVID lockdown and being on Zoom. He's a developmental psychologist from the University of Montreal, whose life's work is on the origins of aggression Where does it come from? When do you need to worry about it? And how do you curb it when you do need to worry about it? So I'm delighted to turn the podium over to Richard Tromblay to launch the day. Our developmental perspective.
Thank you. You can see that the problem we are facing is a task that Hercules had in terms of cutting many heads. I started working on this problem of aggression, of violent behavior in the early 1970s when I was working as a clinician with mentally ill offenders. Most of the people I was working with had killed someone. And I did this work for about 3 years and decided that I would try to help those who are at risk of ending their lives in prison like this. And so I worked with juvenile delinquents and aggressive elementary school children. And after a few years, I started to do research and decided that I would start earlier in infancy. And I am now working with pregnant women. So it's been a long trajectory, and I'm going to share what I have found as I did this. And I guess if I had been more attentive to Aristotle when I was doing my bachelor degree, I would have saved a little bit of time. Aristotle says, he who considers things in their first growth and origin will obtain the clearest view of them. More recently, Nelson Mandela wrote an introduction to the World Health Organization report on violence and health, and wrote, "We must address the roots of violence. Only then will we transform the next century's legacy from a crushing burden into a cautionary lesson." The first man that appears to have quantified the development of at least criminal behavior is Adolphe Quetelet. Adolphe Quetelet was an astronomer, but he was interested also in human behavior. He started calculating, he did this survey of French prisons and showed that there was an age crime curve. Criminologists still talk about the age crime curve that Adolphe Quetelet was the first to draw. And as you can see, most of the prisoners, the largest number of prisoners were young men, and with age there were less and less prisoners. Now, if we look at today, at least, until 2010, from US data, we see the same curve in 1980, 1994, and 2010. The peak is a little bit younger in terms of offenses, but it's around 18 years of age. And if we look at sex differences, the ratio of women to men who had committed a homicide, according to Quetelet, in France in 18 2020 were 11.7 women per 100 men. And if you look at the US data, the last one I looked at was 2014, you have 11.6 women per 100 men. I guess the conclusion to these statistics is things haven't changed that much in the past 200 years. The United States National Academy of Science panel on understanding and control of violent behavior in 1993 wrote the following concerning the origins of violent behavior. And they were referring to modern psychological perspectives, which emphasize that aggressive and violent behaviors are learned responses to frustration, that they can also be learned as instrument for achieving goals, and that the learning occurs by observing models of such behavior. Such models may be observed in the family, among peers, elsewhere in the neighborhood, through the mass media, and now on internet. So the state of knowledge at the time, 1993, was that we learn to aggress. And this idea that we learn to aggress and we learn all the bad things was written by Jean-Jacques Rousseau in his book on education. The first phrase is, God makes all things good, man meddles with them, and they become evil. So we learn with time. In the early 1980s, I started a longitudinal study that we call the Montreal longitudinal and experimental study, because we also experimented prevention of behavior problems. And this study was done in low socioeconomic areas of Montreal. We took a sample of 1,000. In fact, we took all the kids, all the boys from the kindergarten in low SES neighborhoods in Montreal. So it gave us around 1,000 boys, and we've been assessing them almost yearly, assessment until age 19, and occasionally now that they are adults. We have data from teacher, peers, parents, self-reports, and we even have their income tax report now. What we saw by looking at the frequency of physical aggressions reported by teachers is that we had 4 groups. So that's physical aggression between kindergarten and age 16. And so you see, there is a group that showed high physical aggression from kindergarten up to the middle of adolescence, and it's a group, it's 4% of the boys. Then we have a group that showed high aggression in kindergarten, and it decreased with time, 28%. A group with less physical aggression, occasional physical aggression from kindergarten, and decreasing with time, and 14% of the boys who, there were never reports of them using physical aggression. The boys that were on the high physical aggression trajectory over time, we saw that they failed in school, tobacco use, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, early sex, violence, depression, unemployment, poverty. So clearly being highly aggressive in kindergarten and maintaining that behavior puts you on a trajectory that is not very good. We also studied girls in another longitudinal study. It's a random sample of kindergarten children in the province of Quebec. And we saw that girls who had problems with aggression and problems with hyperactivity, and that was 4% of the sample, also had a similar trajectory. The frequency was high in kindergarten and decreased with age, but as they became adolescents and adults, they were abusing tobacco, they were failing in school, they had early sex, partner aggression, depression, teenage pregnancy, and they were on welfare. So problems of aggression at the start of school is a bad sign for children. Now, we did a preventive intervention with the aggressive boys from kindergarten. And the intervention was helping parents, parent training that we call. We also did training, social skills training with the boys. And also we had the teachers, we helped the teachers support those children. And what we saw over time is that the boys, the aggressive boys that we helped, less of them failed to finish high school, and less of them had a criminal record by age 20, I think it was 24. So clearly these problems, if there is strong support starting in early elementary school, we can prevent the long-term damage. So the conclusion from these early studies was that physical aggression does not start during adolescence. The frequency of physical aggression does not increase after kindergarten. Children use physical aggression most often in kindergarten. The most aggressive adolescents were the most aggressive in kindergarten. An intensive preventive intervention for boys early in elementary school significantly reduced the risk of school failure and adult criminality. Now, having seen this, the question was, if frequency of physical aggressions were highest in kindergarten, when do humans start to physically aggress? And so we created the Quebec longitudinal study of children starting at birth, where we've been following 2,000, a little bit more than 2,000 children. It's a representative sample of the births in 1997, 1998. We've been assessing them yearly, and they are now in their early 20s. And we have data from all sources we could find. And we're assessing physical, emotional, cognitive, and social development. Now, this is a picture of a friend of mine, and he sent me this picture and he said, look, my grandson is doing the things that you are doing. He's only 6 months old. And I asked the mother if I could use the picture for my talks. And she said, yes, at one condition. You must say that he was only defending himself.
Non, ça, c'est mieux que nous-mêmes.
Okay, so this is a 3-year-old with his brother, 18 months old. The parents were looking for help and allowed a psychologist to film what was going on in the house. So it gives you an idea of how violent children can be, young children can be. And it's not poverty. You can see that the quantity of toys, that there was plenty of toys to play with there. Okay, so the data from this longitudinal study is showing that the peak in physical aggression from age 1.5 to 21 years of age is between 2 and 4 years of age. The terrible twos, it's based on facts. The fact that we call children the terrible twos, it's between 2 and 4 years of age that there is the highest frequency of physical aggression. So if we compare the age crime curve that was done by Kitley and our age crime curve, we see that the problem of aggression is there very early. And it's interesting, as at one point a journalist told me that her father was a professor of philosophy at the University of Toronto and had said that I should read St. Augustine. And so I read St. Augustine, and St. Augustine, after having observed children, wrote, "It is not the infant's will that is harmless, but the weakness of infants' limbs." So we can tolerate young children's aggression, but as they grow stronger, it's less and less tolerable. We did a intervention during daycare, and we've shown that quality daycare will help prevent the problems that the children have later on. So the children who participated in high quality daycare, as they grew older, they were less and less physically aggressive compared to the control group. So the conclusions from that part of our studies is that humans do not learn to physically aggress. They learn not to physically aggress. Chronic physical aggression is very rarely late onset. From the available evidence, this appears to be true for other behavior problems such as stealing and destruction of property. And preschool education and intensive early elementary school interventions reduce behavior problems during adolescence. They also reduce school failure and adult criminality. Now, Thomas Hobbes, I think, had must have observed infants very closely, because he summarizes our results when he wrote, "Unless you give infants everything they want, they cry and get angry. They even beat their own parents. Thus, an evil man is rather like a sturdy boy or a man of childish mind. And evil is simply want of reason at an age when it normally accrues to men by nature." You'll see, we'll talk about genetics, governed by discipline, parenting, and experience of harm, peer interactions, having the experience of interacting with your peers. So the questions that I've been working with colleagues to address in the past 10, 20 years, it's which mechanisms prevent some children from learning to gain control over their physical aggressions, and which mechanisms need to be targeted to prevent chronic physical aggression. Part of our studies was a study of twins. We've been following 600 pairs of twins, and twins helps us get at the genetic part of these problems. And so what we observe in terms of the frequency of physical aggressions with twins is that similar monozygotic twins are much more similar in terms of the frequency of their physical aggressions. And by analyzing the data, we conclude that genetic factors explain between 50 and 62% of the variance in frequency of physical aggressions between 20 months and 50 months after birth. Now, if there are important genetic effects, there are clearly also important environmental factors. And these factors I've compared to Hercules Hydra. To a certain extent, I think we have to address all the problems at the same time. And these problems are the following: maternal low education, early motherhood, poor marital relations, poverty, maternal anger, maternal depression, maternal stress, and maternal nutrition, and smoking during pregnancy. So in our large samples, these are our best environmental predictors of high physical aggression over time.
Richard, this is your 5-minute warning.
Okay, thank you. Now, there is genetic, but 20 years ago at a meeting in Toronto of the Canadian Institute of Advanced Research, our colleagues Moishe Schiff and Michael Meany presented data on rats showing that the importance of maternal licking, and the more the rats are licked, the longer they live. And this has influenced the work that we've been doing since then. And with monkeys that were separated at birth, we showed that the brains of these monkeys had, there was an important epigenetic impact on the development of their brains. And we've shown with subjects in our studies that males with chronic physical aggression have lower serotonin synthesis in the orbitofrontal cortex, but also serotonin synthesis in the left and right orbital cortex was associated with DNA methylation level in T cells and monocytes. So this is my summary of what appears to be going on. Girls with problems who fail in school, who abuse tobacco, early sex, teenage pregnancy, partner abuse, depression. They mate with boys that have similar problems. And when an obstetrician sees a young pregnant woman who failed in school, smokes, is depressed, is angry, is stressed, is malnourished, is on welfare, and has poor marital relationships, this is a sign that there will be an impact, an epigenetic impact on brain development, and the children of this couple are very highly likely to have behavior problems in their development. So my conclusions: epigenetic analyses have started to identify mechanisms by which the environment substantially impact human development. Environments, mothers and fathers' behavior and nutrition can modify genetic programming. By enriching the environment at the appropriate time and intensity, we may have system-wide impacts on gene expression. Environmental effects on human development, like genetic effects, appear strongly intergenerational and highly linked to maternal development. If this is true, prevention of chronic physical aggression and other developmental problems need to take an intergenerational perspective and start in early pregnancy at the latest. This means that although chronic behavior problems are largely a male problem, its early prevention requires giving the best services to pregnant women and families of newborn, because this targets the natural intergenerational biopsychosocial systems. This conclusion is also probably true for numerous other physical problems like obesity, cardiovascular disease, psychological problems such as depression and substance abuse, and socioeconomic problems such as school performance and employment. Someone said this more simply and clearly. The chief of the Soli people in Zambia said, when you educate a man, an individual is educated. When you educate a woman, you educate her children and thus the nation. Thank you.